The wrench slipped from my grease-stained fingers and clattered against the concrete floor of my garage at 11:47 p.m. My phone had just buzzed with a message that would destroy everything I thought I knew about my 15-year marriage. Landed in Paris safely. At the hotel now. Will call you tomorrow. Love you. Caroline. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I stared at the screen, engine oil still dripping from my hands onto my worn Carhartt coveralls. Something felt wrong. Caroline never texted like that. Too formal, too distant, like she was checking off items on a corporate to-do list rather than talking to her husband. I'd been working late in the garage again, trying to rebuild the transmission on my 1987 Mustang. The same car I'd driven when Caroline and I first met at that law school mixer 20 years ago. Back then, she'd laughed at my grease-stained fingernails and called me her blue-collar prince. Now she barely looked at me when I came home from the auto shop. My name is Jack Morrison, and I've spent the last 2 decades building Morrison's Auto Repair from a one-bay operation into the most trusted shop in Millfield, Ohio. It's honest work, and it pays well enough to support Caroline's law career and our daughter Sophie's college expenses. But apparently, honest work isn't enough anymore. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and called Caroline's number. Straight to voicemail. International roaming, I told myself. She's probably asleep. But the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. Caroline had announced this Paris trip 3 weeks ago over dinner at Romano's, our usual Friday night spot. "It's a girls' trip," she'd said, cutting into her salmon with surgical precision. "Jenna and I need some time away. You know how stressful work has been." Jenna Walsh was Caroline's best friend since law school, a real estate attorney with perfectly manicured nails and a talent for making me feel like I'd tracked mud through a museum whenever she visited our house. The two of them had been inseparable for years, sharing everything from legal strategies to shopping expeditions. I'd supported the trip idea. Hell, I'd even suggested it might be good for Caroline to get away from the pressure of her corporate law firm. She'd been working 16-hour days for months, coming home exhausted and irritable. Our conversations had dwindled to logistics about bills and Sophie's college applications, but something about that text bothered me. I pulled up Caroline's previous messages, scrolling through weeks of mundane exchanges about grocery lists and appointment reminders. Then I found it, a message from 2 days ago that I'd barely noticed at the time. "Don't forget to pack the blue dress. He loves you in blue. Jenna." My blood turned to ice water. I read it again, then again. The blue dress was Caroline's favorite, a designer piece she'd bought for our anniversary dinner last year. She'd worn it exactly once, and I'd told her she looked stunning. Why would Jenna mention what he loved? I called Jenna's number. It rang 4 times before her sleepy voice answered. "Jack, it's almost midnight. What's wrong?" "Hey Jenna, sorry to wake you. I just wanted to make sure you and Caroline got to Paris safely." Silence. Long, telling silence. "Jack, I'm in Miami. I've been here all week for the Henderson closing. What are you talking about?" The wrench I'd been holding clattered to the floor again. "Caroline said she was in Paris with you. A girls' trip." "I haven't talked to Caroline in 3 days. Jack, what's going on?" I hung up without answering. My hands shook as I scrolled through Caroline's phone records online. We shared a family plan, and I'd always had access to the account details. There it was, a call to Air France reservations, followed by 2 international numbers with French country codes, numbers I didn't recognize. I spent the next hour digging through our shared credit card statements. 2 first-class tickets to Paris, charged to our joint account, hotel reservations at the George V, dinner reservations for 2 at restaurants I couldn't pronounce. But the name on the second ticket wasn't Jenna Walsh. It was Luc Dubois. I sat in my garage until 3 a.m., staring at that name and trying to piece together when my wife had started lying to me. When she'd started planning a romantic getaway with another man using our money. When our marriage had become such a joke that she felt comfortable enough to lie to my face while I smiled and wished her a good trip. Luc Dubois. Even his name sounded like something out of a romance novel. I pulled up Facebook and searched for him. There he was, tall, dark-haired, wearing an expensive suit in his profile picture. His bio listed him as a business consultant based in Paris. His photos showed him at wine tastings, art galleries, and sidewalk cafes. Everything I wasn't. But here's what really got me. Caroline had liked dozens of his photos going back 8 months. Photos of sunsets over the Seine, pictures of French pastries, even a shirtless gym selfie that made me want to put my fist through the computer screen. 8 months. She'd been planning this for 8 months. I scrolled through his friends list and found Caroline's profile, listed under her maiden name, Caroline Fletcher, a name she hadn't used since we got married. She'd created an entire alternate identity just to flirt with this French pretty boy. By 4 a.m. I'd seen enough. I crafted a simple text message to my cheating wife. Hope you're enjoying Paris with Luc. Divorce papers will be waiting when you get back. Don't bother coming home. I hit send and blocked her number. Then I opened a beer and started planning my revenge. The next morning brought 3 missed calls from Caroline's parents, 2 angry voicemails from my daughter Sophie, and 1 very interesting conversation with my old friend Frank Kowalski at the gym. Frank runs Kowalski's boxing gym downtown, a no-frills operation where I've been working out for the past 10 years. He's 62, built like a fire hydrant, and has the kind of street wisdom that comes from growing up on the wrong side of Millfield. I was pounding the heavy bag when he approached, wrapping his hands around a cup of coffee that looked tiny in his massive grip. You look like hell, Morrison. And you're hitting that bag like it owes you money. I stopped punching and wiped sweat from my forehead. Caroline's cheating on me. Frank nodded like I'd just told him the weather forecast. French guy? I stared at him. How did you know? She's been coming to Romano's with some slick-looking European type for the past 2 months. My nephew Tony tends bar there. Says they hold hands and whisper like teenagers. Frank took a sip of his coffee. Tony figured you knew. Of course. In a town like Millfield, everyone knows everyone else's business. Everyone except the husband, apparently. What are you going to do about it? Frank asked. Divorce her. Take her for everything she's worth. Frank shook his head. That's thinking like a victim, Jack. You want to divorce her? Fine. But first, you make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person she really is. You don't just roll over and let her walk away with your dignity. He was right. Caroline had humiliated me in front of the entire town, and I'd been too blind to see it. But now that my eyes were open, I was going to make sure everyone else could see clearly too. I spent the rest of the morning at the auto shop, but I couldn't concentrate on work. Every time I tried to focus on rebuilding an engine or diagnosing a transmission problem, I kept thinking about Caroline and Luc walking hand in hand through the streets of Paris. Around noon, Sophie called. Dad, what the hell is wrong with you? Mom called me crying, saying you sent her some horrible text and blocked her number. Sophie was 20, a junior at Ohio State studying pre-law like her mother. She'd inherited Caroline's sharp tongue and her ability to make me feel guilty about things that weren't my fault. Your mother lied to me, Sophie. She's in Paris with another man, not on a girls' trip with Jenna. That's ridiculous. Mom would never cheat. Check Jenna's Instagram. She's in Miami, not Paris. Silence on the other end of the line. I could hear Sophie typing on her laptop. Oh my God, she whispered. Jenna posted pictures from South Beach yesterday. Your mother has been lying to both of us, sweetheart. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. But Sophie's sympathy lasted about 10 seconds. Even if that's true, you can't just abandon her in a foreign country. What if something happens to her? She's with Luc. He can take care of her. Who the hell is Luc? I gave Sophie the basics. French businessman, 8 months of secret communication, romantic getaway charged to our credit cards. By the time I finished, she was crying. "I can't believe this is happening," she sobbed. "We're supposed to be a family." We were a family, until your mother decided to upgrade to the French model. After I hung up with Sophie, I drove to the Millfield Public Library and spent 2 hours researching everything I could find about Luc Dubois. What I discovered made my blood boil. Luc wasn't just a business consultant. He was a professional seducer who specialized in targeting wealthy American women. His LinkedIn profile showed a pattern of short-term consulting contracts with law firms and corporations in major U.S. cities. His Instagram was full of photos with different women, all of them successful professionals, all of them married. Caroline wasn't his first victim. She wasn't even his most recent. I found a blog post from 6 months ago written by a woman in Chicago whose marriage had been destroyed by Luc's charm offensive. She'd discovered he was married to a French woman named Isabelle and had 2 young children in Lyon. His entire American persona was an act designed to separate lonely wives from their money and their marriages. I printed out everything I could find and drove straight to Caroline's law firm. Brennan, Walsh, and Associates occupied the top 3 floors of the tallest building in downtown Millfield. Caroline was a senior associate specializing in corporate litigation, and she'd been angling for a partnership for the past 3 years. I asked the receptionist to speak with Richard Brennan, the managing partner. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison, but Mr. Brennan is in meetings all afternoon. Can I schedule something for next week?" "Tell him it's about Caroline's extended vacation in Paris. He'll want to hear this." 5 minutes later, I was sitting in Brennan's corner office, spreading printouts across his mahogany desk. Brennan was in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that costs more than most people make in a month. "Jack, I'm not sure I should be discussing Caroline's personal business with you. Her personal business is affecting her professional responsibilities. She told you she was taking vacation days for a family emergency, didn't she?" Brennan's expression confirmed my guess. "How did you know that?" "Because she told me she was going to Paris with her girlfriend Jenna. But Jenna's in Miami, and Caroline's actually with this man." I slid Luc's photo across the desk. "A married French con artist who specializes in seducing American professionals." Brennan studied the photo and the accompanying documents. His face grew darker with each page. "This is very concerning, Jack. Caroline billed 42 hours last week to the Patterson case, but if she was planning this trip..." "Check her computer records. I bet you'll find she's been communicating with Luc during work hours for months." I left Brennan's office knowing that Caroline's partnership dreams had just evaporated. But I wasn't done yet. My next stop was the Millfield Country Club, where Caroline and I had been members for the past 5 years. It was her idea to join. She said it was important for networking and maintaining our social standing in the community. I found Jenna's husband, David, on the golf course. David was a successful real estate developer, the kind of guy who wore polo shirts and khakis like a uniform and drove a BMW that he washed twice a week. "Jack, good to see you. How's the auto repair business?" David had always been condescending toward me, but today I was going to enjoy watching his world crumble. "Business is great, David. But I wanted to talk to you about something more personal, about Jenna and Caroline's friendship." I showed him the same evidence I'd shown Brennan, plus the text messages I'd discovered on Caroline's phone. David's face went through several color changes as he processed what he was seeing. "You're telling me that Jenna has been covering for Caroline's affair?" "For 8 months. Your wife has been lying to you just as much as mine has been lying to me." David's golf club trembled in his hands. "I trusted Jenna completely. She said she was in Miami for work. She is in Miami, but she's been Caroline's alibi for months of secret meetings with Luc. Check her phone records, David. I bet you'll find a lot of interesting conversations." I left David standing on the 7th tee, staring at his phone with the expression of a man whose perfect life had just revealed itself to be a carefully constructed lie. By 6 p.m., I was back home, sitting in my kitchen with a beer and a growing sense of satisfaction. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon with calls from Caroline's blocked number, but I ignored them all. Instead, I called my lawyer. "Tom, it's Jack Morrison. I need to file for divorce." 3 days into Caroline's Parisian adventure, the ripple effects of my revelations were spreading through Millfield like wildfire. David Walsh had confronted Jenna about her role in covering for Caroline's affair, leading to a screaming match at the country club that was witnessed by half the town's social elite. Richard Brennan had launched an internal investigation into Caroline's work habits and discovered she'd been using company resources to research French travel destinations and communicate with Luke during billable hours. But the most satisfying development came from an unexpected source. I was replacing brake pads on Mrs. Henderson's Buick when my phone rang. The caller ID showed an international number. "Hello, is this Jack Morrison?" The voice was female, with a thick French accent. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is Isabelle Dubois. I believe you know my husband, Luke." I nearly dropped the phone. "Your husband?" "Yes. I found your wife's messages on his phone. Very romantic messages. Very expensive messages about hotels and restaurants in Paris." Her English was precise but heavily accented. "I think we should talk." Isabel explained that she'd discovered Luke's pattern of seducing American women 6 months ago, but had been afraid to confront him because of their children. When she found Caroline's messages, however, she decided she'd had enough. "He brings these women to our city, spends their money, makes promises he never keeps. Then he comes home to me and acts like nothing happened. But this time is different. This time, I fight back." "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to help me destroy him. And your wife, too." Isabel had access to Luke's phone records, email accounts, and financial information. What she revealed made my stomach turn. Caroline had been sending Luke money for months. Small amounts at first, but escalating to thousands of dollars in recent weeks. Money that came from our joint savings account. Money that was supposed to be for Sophie's college tuition. "He told her he was starting a consulting business in America," Isabel explained. "That he needed investment capital to secure office space in New York." She believed him. "How much has she sent him?" $47,000. I sat down hard on my garage stool. $47,000. Nearly half of our savings gone. Sent to a married con artist who was probably laughing about it over dinner with my wife. "Isabel, I want to help you. What do you need from me?" "I need you to keep him in America as long as possible. I'm filing for divorce, but French law is complicated. If he comes back to Lyon, he can fight for custody of our children and half of our assets. But if he stays in America, he becomes your problem instead of yours." "Exactly." We spent the next hour developing a plan. Isabel would send me copies of all Luke's communications with Caroline, including several other American women he was currently pursuing. I would use this information to expose him publicly and ensure that Caroline's reputation was destroyed along with his. But first, I had a more immediate problem to solve. Caroline was scheduled to return from Paris in 3 days, and I needed to be ready for her. I drove to our house, the house I'd been avoiding since sending that text, and began methodically packing Caroline's belongings. Clothes, shoes, jewelry, law books, everything that belonged to her went into boxes that I stacked in the garage. While I worked, I found more evidence of her deception. Hidden in her jewelry box was a second phone, a cheap prepaid device that contained months of explicit messages between Caroline and Luke. The messages were graphic, romantic, and utterly devastating to read, but they were also evidence. I photographed every message, every email, every receipt I could find. By the time I finished, I had enough documentation to prove Caroline's infidelity, her financial betrayal, and her systematic deception of our marriage. The next morning, I drove to Sophie's apartment near the Ohio State campus. My daughter needed to hear the truth from me before she heard it from her mother. Sophie lived in a trendy complex filled with other pre-law students, the kind of place where everyone drove cars their parents bought and wore clothes that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. She answered the door wearing yoga pants and an Ohio State sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk, sweetheart, about your mother and what's really been happening." I showed Sophie everything: the financial records, the phone messages, the evidence of Luke's other victims. She read in silence, her expression growing darker with each revelation. "Mom stole money from my college fund to give to this guy? $47,000. Money that was supposed to secure your future." Sophie started crying, but these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. "I defended her, Dad. I called you horrible names because I thought you were being cruel and unreasonable. But she's been lying to all of us. I'm sorry you had to find out this way." "No, I'm glad I found out. I'm glad I know what kind of person she really is." Sophie wiped her eyes and looked at me with a determination I recognized from her childhood. "What are we going to do about it?" "We're going to make sure everyone knows the truth, starting with her precious law firm." Sophie smiled for the first time in days. "I know some people at Mom's firm, paralegals, junior associates, people who never liked how she treated them." "What do you mean?" "Mom's not exactly popular at work, Dad. She's arrogant, demanding, and she takes credit for other people's work. There are a lot of people there who would love to see her taken down a few notches." That afternoon, Sophie and I visited 3 of Caroline's junior colleagues at a coffee shop near the law firm. What we learned confirmed my worst suspicions about my wife's character. Caroline had been systematically undermining her colleagues for years, stealing credit for their research, sabotaging their cases, and spreading gossip to advance her own career. She'd made enemies of nearly everyone below her level at the firm. "She's been bragging about her French boyfriend for weeks," said Jennifer, a second-year associate who looked barely old enough to drink, "telling everyone how sophisticated and cultured he is compared to American men. She said she was finally dating someone who appreciated her intelligence." "She said that?" I asked. "She said a lot of things, about how she'd outgrown her marriage, how she deserved better than a small-town life with a mechanic." Jennifer looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Mr. Morrison. I probably shouldn't have repeated that." "No, I'm glad you did. It helps me understand who I'm really dealing with." By the time Caroline's plane landed at Cleveland Hopkins International Airport, I was ready for her. I'd changed the locks on our house, moved her belongings to a storage unit, and opened a separate bank account with the remaining funds from our joint savings. I'd also prepared a welcome home surprise that she'd never forget. Caroline called me from the airport, using a different phone number. "Jack, we need to talk. I can explain everything." "There's nothing to explain, Caroline. I know about Luke, I know about the money, and I know about what you've been saying about me at work. You don't understand. It's complicated. It's really not. You're a cheater and a liar, and everyone in town knows it now." "What do you mean everyone knows?" I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. "Check your email when you get home. You'll understand." What Caroline would find in her email was a detailed account of her affair, complete with screenshots of her messages to Luke, copies of the financial transfers, and testimonials from her co-workers about her character. The same email had been sent to every partner at her law firm, every member of the country club, and every contact in her professional network. But the real surprise was waiting for her at the house. Caroline arrived at our house at 9 p.m., pulling into the driveway in the Uber she'd taken from the airport. I watched from the living room window as she struggled with her luggage, looking exhausted and defeated. She tried her key in the front door, then rang the doorbell when it didn't work. I let her wait for 5 minutes before I answered. Caroline looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her designer outfit was wrinkled, and her eyes were red from crying. The confident, sophisticated woman who'd left for Paris a week ago had been replaced by someone who looked broken and desperate. "Jack, please, we need to talk." "We really don't. Your belongings are in storage unit 47 at secure space on Route 9. The key is with the office manager. You can't just throw me out of my own house." "It's not your house anymore. I've filed for divorce, and my lawyer has advised me not to cohabitate with you during the proceedings." Caroline pushed past me into the living room, dropping her suitcase and spinning around to face me. "This is insane, Jack. You're destroying our family over a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding? You stole $50,000 from our daughter's college fund to finance your affair with a married con artist. What part of that did I misunderstand?" Her face went pale. "How do you know about the money?" "I know everything, Caroline. I know about Luke's wife and children in Lyon. I know about the other women he's been scamming. I know about what you've been saying about me at work." I stepped closer to her, and she backed away. "Most importantly, I know that you've been planning to leave me for months, and you were just waiting for the right moment to make your move." Caroline collapsed onto the couch, her composure finally cracking completely. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen? You were going to come back from Paris and ask for a divorce? Tell me you'd found someone better?" "I was confused, Jack. Our marriage has been dead for years. We barely talk. We don't have sex. We're like strangers living in the same house. So you decided to fix that by stealing from our daughter and running off with a French gigolo?" "Luke isn't a gigolo. He's a successful businessman who understands me in ways you never could." I laughed, and the sound was bitter even to my own ears. "Luke is married, Caroline. He has 2 kids and a wife who's divorcing him because of women like you. You're not special. You're just another mark in his long con." Caroline's phone buzzed and she grabbed it eagerly. Her face fell as she read the message. "What is it?" I asked. "Luke says he can't see me anymore. He says his wife found out about us and she's threatening to take his children away." Caroline looked up at me with desperate eyes. "This is your fault. You contacted his wife, didn't you?" "I didn't have to. Isabel found your messages on his phone and reached out to me. Turns out she's been looking for evidence to use against him in their divorce." "You're lying." I pulled out my phone and showed her the email chain between Isabel and me, complete with screenshots of Luke's messages to 3 other American women. Caroline read in silence, her face growing paler with each revelation. "He was seeing other women while he was with me?" "You were seeing another man while you were with me. What's the difference?" Caroline stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back. "I need a drink." "There's no alcohol in the house. I poured it all out." "Why would you do that?" "Because I knew you'd come here looking for sympathy, and I wanted you to face this conversation completely sober." Caroline sat back down, looking defeated. "What do you want from me, Jack?" "I want you to sign the divorce papers without fighting me. I want you to admit what you've done to Sophie and apologize for stealing her college money. And I want you to leave Millfield and never come back." "I can't just leave. My job, my life, everything is here." "Your job is gone, Caroline. Brennan fired you this afternoon for misuse of company resources and violation of the ethics clause in your employment contract." Caroline stared at me in shock. "He can't do that." "He already did. Check your email." Caroline fumbled with her phone, scrolling through messages. I watched her face crumble as she read the termination letter from her law firm. "You destroyed my career." "You destroyed your career. I just made sure everyone knew about it." We sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of 15 years of marriage settling around us like dust. I thought about the young woman I'd fallen in love with, the ambitious law student who'd laughed at my jokes and made me believe I could be more than just a small-town mechanic. That woman was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize and didn't want to know. Caroline finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "What about Sophie?" "Sophie knows everything. She's the one who helped me contact your co-workers at the law firm." "She helped you? She's disgusted by what you've done, especially the part where you stole her college money." Caroline started crying again, but I felt no sympathy for her. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. "I never meant for any of this to happen." "Yes, you did. You planned it for 8 months, Caroline. You opened secret bank accounts, created fake social media profiles, and lied to everyone who cared about you. This didn't just happen. You made it happen." Caroline looked around the living room, taking in the family photos I'd removed from the walls, the empty spaces where her belongings used to be. "So, this is it? 20 years together, and it ends like this?" "It ended the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for you anymore. I'm just making it official." Caroline stood up and walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back to me. "I did love you once, Jack. I want you to know that. Once isn't enough, Caroline. Marriage requires loving someone every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." She nodded and picked up her suitcase. "I'll sign the papers." "Good. My lawyer will send them to you tomorrow." Caroline paused at the door. "What are you going to tell people about why our marriage ended?" "I'm not going to tell them anything. The truth speaks for itself." After Caroline left, I sat in my empty living room and tried to process what had just happened. 20 years of marriage ended in a single conversation. A family destroyed by lies and betrayal, and the promise of something better that turned out to be nothing at all. But I wasn't finished yet. Caroline had humiliated me publicly, and I was going to return the favor. The Millfield Annual Charity Auction was the social event of the year, held every October at the country club to raise money for the local children's hospital. Caroline had been on the organizing committee for 3 years, and she'd been looking forward to this year's event because she'd finally been chosen to serve as the evening's master of ceremonies. Of course, that was before her life imploded. I hadn't planned to attend the auction. Caroline and I usually went together, and I'd assumed that my invitation died with our marriage. But 3 days after our confrontation, I received a call from Margaret Brennan, Richard's wife and the auction's head organizer. "Jack, I hope you'll still plan to attend the auction on Saturday. I know things are difficult right now, but the community needs to see that you're moving forward." "I appreciate the invitation, Margaret, but I'm not sure it's appropriate." "Nonsense. You've been a part of this community for 20 years. Caroline's choices don't change that." Margaret's words gave me an idea. A way to end this chapter of my life with dignity, while ensuring that Caroline's betrayal was fully exposed to the people who mattered most in Millfield's social hierarchy. "Actually, Margaret, I'd like to make a special donation to this year's auction. Something significant." "That's wonderful, Jack. What did you have in mind?" "I'd like to donate the proceeds from the sale of Caroline's jewelry collection. All of it, including her engagement ring and wedding band." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "Jack, are you sure about this?" "Completely sure. Caroline abandoned her marriage and her family. She doesn't deserve to keep the symbols of promises she broke. This is going to cause quite a stir. I'm counting on it." Saturday evening arrived with unseasonably warm weather and a packed house at the country club. I'd spent the afternoon getting ready, wearing my best suit and preparing for what I knew would be the most important performance of my life. I arrived at the auction with a velvet-lined jewelry box containing Caroline's entire collection, her engagement ring, wedding band, anniversary gifts, and the diamond necklace I'd bought her for her 40th birthday. The total value was close to $30,000, money that would now go to help sick children instead of adorning the neck of a woman who'd betrayed her family. The auction was already in full swing when I walked into the ballroom. Margaret had arranged for me to make my donation during the evening's final segment after the major items had been sold and the crowd was feeling generous. I mingled with the other guests, accepting condolences and support from people who'd known Caroline and me for years. Word of our divorce had spread quickly through Millfield's social circles, and most people seemed to understand that Caroline was the villain in our story. "Jack, I'm so sorry about what happened. said Dr. Patricia Williams, whose husband had been Caroline's client on several real estate deals. I never would have expected this from Caroline. People aren't always who they seem to be, I replied, but I'm grateful to learn the truth, even if it was painful. Similar conversations happened throughout the evening. The consensus was clear. Caroline had fallen from grace, and I was the wronged party deserving of sympathy and support. At 9:30 p.m., Margaret took the microphone to introduce the evening's final auction item. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special donation tonight from Jack Morrison. Jack has generously offered Caroline's jewelry collection to benefit the Children's Hospital, including some truly stunning pieces. I walked to the front of the room and took the microphone from Margaret. The ballroom fell silent as I opened the jewelry box and displayed its contents. Thank you all for being here tonight. As many of you know, Caroline and I are getting divorced. She decided that our 20-year marriage wasn't enough for her, so she stole $50,000 from our daughter's college fund and used it to finance an affair with a married man in Paris. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Several people pulled out their phones to record what was happening. Caroline thought she deserved better than a small-town life with a mechanic. She thought she deserved someone more sophisticated, more cultured, more worthy of her intelligence. I held up her engagement ring, letting it catch the light from the chandeliers. But what she really deserved was to have her lies exposed and her betrayal made public. I placed the ring back in the box and continued. These pieces represent promises that Caroline broke, vows that she abandoned, and a love that she threw away for a con artist who was using her just like he'd used dozens of other women. I can't give them back their original meaning, but I can give them a new purpose. The room was completely silent now. Even the waiters had stopped moving. Every dollar raised from the sale of these items will go directly to the Children's Hospital. Caroline's selfishness will be transformed into something that helps innocent kids who are fighting for their lives. Her betrayal will become someone else's hope. I closed the jewelry box and handed it to Margaret. The bidding starts at $5,000. What happened next exceeded my wildest expectations. The bidding war for Caroline's jewelry was fierce, with multiple people competing not just for the items themselves, but for the chance to participate in Caroline's public humiliation. The final price was $48,000, nearly enough to replace the money Caroline had stolen from Sophie's college fund. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was the look on the faces of Caroline's former friends and colleagues as they realized that her reputation in Millfield was permanently destroyed. She would never be able to show her face in this community again. After the auction ended, I was surrounded by well-wishers and supporters. People who had known Caroline for years were expressing their shock and disappointment at her behavior. Several women mentioned that they'd never trusted her completely, that there had always been something cold and calculating about her personality. "You handled this with real class, Jack," said Tom Henderson, a local businessman whose wife had been one of Caroline's closest friends. Caroline made her choice, and now she has to live with it. As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: peace. Caroline's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but I'd found a way to turn her cruelty into something positive. The money from her jewelry would help sick children, and her reputation was in ruins. Most importantly, I'd proven to myself and to everyone else that I wasn't a victim. I was a man who'd been wronged, but I was also a man who'd fought back with intelligence, dignity, and devastating effectiveness. The next morning, I received a text from an unknown number. It was Caroline, using yet another phone. "I saw the video from last night. How could you humiliate me like that?" I replied immediately. "You humiliated yourself. I just made sure everyone could see it clearly. I'll never be able to come back to Millfield now. That was the point. You've destroyed my life." "No, Caroline. You destroyed your own life. I just refused to let you destroy mine too." I blocked the number and deleted the conversation. Caroline was no longer my problem. 3 weeks later, I received the signed divorce papers in the mail, along with a brief note from Caroline's new lawyer in Columbus. She was waiving all claims to our house, our business, and our remaining assets in exchange for a quick, uncontested divorce. Sophie called me that evening, her voice lighter than it had been in months. "Dad, I got a letter from Mom today. She's moving to Seattle to start over. She says she's sorry for what she did and she's going to pay back the money she stole from my college fund." "How is she going to do that?" "She sold her car and some other stuff. It's not the full amount, but it's a start." "Are you going to forgive her?" Sophie was quiet for a moment. "Maybe someday. But not yet. What she did was unforgivable, and she needs to understand that actions have consequences. I'm proud of you for standing up for what's right, even when it was hard." "I learned that from you, Dad. You showed me that sometimes you have to fight for your dignity, even when it hurts." 6 months after Caroline left for Paris, I was a different man. I'd lost weight, started dating again, and expanded my auto repair business to include a second location. Sophie was thriving at Ohio State, her college expenses covered by the money from Caroline's jewelry auction and a partial scholarship she'd earned through her own hard work. Most importantly, I'd learned something valuable about myself. I was stronger than I'd ever imagined, capable of surviving betrayal and fighting back against people who tried to destroy me. Caroline had thought she could discard me like an old car that had outlived its usefulness. Instead, she'd discovered that this old car still had plenty of fight left in it. The last time I saw Caroline was at the grocery store in Columbus, where I'd driven to pick up Sophie for spring break. Caroline was in the checkout line ahead of me, looking older and more tired than I remembered. She was buying generic brands and counting coupons, a far cry from the designer lifestyle she'd once enjoyed. She saw me and froze, her face flushing with embarrassment. "Hello, Jack." "Caroline." We stared at each other for a moment, two people who'd once promised to love each other forever and had instead become strangers, bound together only by shared history and mutual resentment. "How are you?" she asked. "I'm doing well. Business is good, Sophie's thriving, and I'm happy." Caroline nodded, looking like she wanted to say something more but couldn't find the words. Finally, she picked up her groceries and walked toward the exit. "Caroline," I called after her. She turned back, hope flickering in her eyes. "I hope you find whatever it was you were looking for." The hope died, replaced by resignation. "I already found it, Jack, and I threw it away." She walked out of the store and out of my life forever. As I drove home to Millfield that evening, I thought about the man I'd been a year ago. Trusting, naive, willing to believe the best about people even when the evidence suggested otherwise. That man was gone, replaced by someone harder but also more honest about the world and the people in it. Caroline had taught me that love isn't enough to sustain a marriage if it's not accompanied by respect, loyalty, and basic human decency. She'd also taught me that sometimes the people closest to you are capable of the deepest betrayals. But most importantly, she'd taught me that I was strong enough to survive anything, even the destruction of everything I'd thought was permanent in my life. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the house Caroline and I had shared for 15 years. It was mine now, filled with new memories and new possibilities. The past was behind me, and the future was whatever I chose to make it. I walked inside, poured myself a beer, and started planning tomorrow.